Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday, October 2nd, and I'm here today to share with you our lesson. This is biology, and what I'd like to do is give you guys an opportunity to see what the lesson is. I'm going to show you what the resources are for today, as well as go over a little bit of new information with you. So this is kind of instead of lecturing material during our synchronous time, and instead of lecturing during synchronous time, I'm going to allow that time as an opportunity for you to work, so that if you have questions on the work, you're able to sit with me and ask those. So for today, you're going to see that I redid Google Classroom just a little bit and tried to reorganize materials so that they're sectioned by week. Now we're on week 3, and this is going to be assignment number 4. So if you look down at the bottom of week 3, assignment 4, we're working on diabetes data analysis with an evidence-based claim. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over these slides right here, the student copy of the diabetes data. I'm going to go over that information with you, and then I'm going to release you to work on your evidence-based claim based on what you find in the data. So I'm going to go ahead and start by opening up my diabetes lesson today. And I think I'm able to present this. There we go. Let me keep my camera up there. So this activity was adapted from a website called Genome Sciences Education Outreach, and they have a ton of data available for us. And one of the really important things that we need to do in science is be able to take a set of data and make some claims based off that data, citing evidence for our reasoning. And so today's focus is looking at diabetes in the United States, and we're going to essentially pick a region that you would like to look at and identify how the diabetes prevalence has changed since 2004. So our essential question today, how has the prevalence of diagnosed diabetes changed since the year 2004, which is when our data set begins? So to start off with the definition of diabetes, diabetes is a disease that occurs when your blood glucose levels, okay, glucose is sugar, which we talked about in our last unit. Remember, we talked about you are what you eat. Sugar is a carbohydrate. And so diabetes is a disease when there's an imbalance of blood sugar. Now, blood sugar is regulated by a hormone called insulin. And typically when someone is suffering from diabetes, it's an issue with getting insulin into the bloodstream, because insulin is what regulates that blood sugar level. Insulin is a hormone made in the pancreas, and what it does is the pancreas will release that insulin to the bloodstream. The bloodstream will then, contain that sugar from the diet, and insulin will basically remove that sugar from the bloodstream so that the bloodstream never gets too much sugar in it, because if there's too much sugar in the bloodstream, that's when there's problems. So we want to be keeping these questions in our brains as we work through our diabetes data. What is glucose? Where does glucose come from in our diets? What foods or drinks contain glucose? What is glucose used in the body? Glucose can be described as a fuel and a toxin. How is that something that our bodies need? How can something so essential to our bodies become toxic? Okay, so that's what diabetes is all about. So thinking about what is glucose, where does it come from in our diets? Remember, glucose is a simple sugar. So carbohydrates are either simple sugars or starches. Simple sugars are things that are characteristically sweet. We want to think table sugar, sodas that are sweet, honey is very sweet, fruit is high in glucose, or fructose, I suppose. Glucose in our body is used as a quick energy resource. So if we're feeling lethargic, or we're feeling tired, or our muscles are tired, generally the way to get quick energy back is to eat something rich in simple sugars or carbohydrates. And then we're going to keep in mind, how can something that is so good for our bodies be bad? I want to point out the word homeostasis here, and that there is such a thing as too much glucose. There is such a thing of having too much energy, or glucose, or energy in the form of sugar, in our bloodstream. That's what we're going to look at with diabetes in this first lesson. So as we look through our data today, we want to just point out that the table right here shows the color key for percentages. So what this means is, if I was surveying 100 people, okay, if I was surveying 100 people, we would say that if the color is cream, then 4 people out of 100 would have diabetes. Okay, if I'm surveying 100 people and that state looks gold, that means between 6 and 7.4 people have diabetes in that state. If I'm looking at a state and that state appears red, that means that out of 100 people, more than 9 people have diabetes. Okay, so what we're looking at is this progression of white, which means we don't have data on that state or it's very low. Cream means there's less than 4.5 people with diabetes, all the way to red. So thinking about that color gradient as we look. So here's the first data set that we have. As you can see, we're looking at the United States here. And as you're looking through this data, you want to be looking at a region. So for example, if your region is over here in the Pacific Northwest, maybe you want to look at Oregon and Washington together, then you're focusing on that region as you look at your data. Some of you might have a connection to another region. Perhaps you want to look down here near Florida or near these southern states. Maybe you want to look up north. Just focus on a region and kind of watch how the prevalence of diabetes changes. Okay, so this is 1994, 95. Okay, so once again, pick a region, watch it. And we're just going to kind of scroll through. You're watching a region, watching how it changes. Remember, the darker that region is, the more diabetes there is. Okay, so we're now in 2004. Okay, now in 2011, we're going to see a big change in data. Now, this is because the survey was basically conducted over cell phone use, and those surveys increased greatly after the year 2011 because of increased cell phone use. We were able to collect more data. So you're going to see a big shift now on this next data set. Okay, now you're going to scroll through this information probably several times. The slideshow's attached to the assignment post. And what you want to identify as you look again is, what do you notice about the data? Pick a region. Pick a region of the country that you're interested in watching. You can watch, you don't even have to have connection to that region. If you notice a specific region in the United States changing a lot that you can be able to talk about, pick that region. It's up to you. So what do you notice about that region? What do you notice about the data? You'll probably have to go back and look at that first chart that talks about the percentages and the colors. You'll have to go back and look at that. And now you want to write about an evidence-based claim. So essentially, you're going to pick a region and you're going to identify what's happening with diabetes in that region over time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this right here, and we're going to head back out to your evidence-based claim, which is on Google Classroom as well. It's right here. It's called the JLG Diabetes Evidence-Based Claim. JLG is just my initials, so I know that that's my document. So you're going to open up this document. You're going to take a look at the questions that relate to the diabetes data, okay? So you want to think about, what do you notice from in the data happening from 2004 to 2015? Actually, what this should be, this should say 1994. So I was able to pull up some more data. So what's happening in the data between 1994 and 2015? Is there a trend or pattern that you see? What you want to do here for this first piece is identify a region. So if you're going to talk about a state, say in Oregon, or in Florida, in Texas, or in the Southwest, pick a region and discuss it here. Evidence. What's the evidence that supports your claim? You might say, in the year 2002, the prevalence was 7.5%, whereas in the year 2014, the prevalence was over 9%. So the key there is using percentages to identify your data source. And then finally, identify how your evidence supports your claim. Okay, so you might say, therefore, in Oregon, the prevalence of diabetes is increasing because of the data I cited with Oregon's prevalence. So you want to think about, how does your data support your claim? You're kind of bringing it all together. Okay. Lastly, based on your claim, do you think that this data is concerning? Why or why not? You want to use the sentence support below. There's some sentence support on the next page to support your response. We're looking at 3 or more sentences here. So do you think it's concerning what you noticed about the diabetes data? Here's that sentence support you can use to write out your evidence, your explain and describe for that question. Okay, so I want to pop back to the slides really quick and talk about diabetes. Okay, so you're working on this assignment, but also I want to go back to this and talk about diabetes a little. Okay, so I want to point out first that there are three types of diabetes. There are three types of diabetes that we're kind of really tracking here. One type of diabetes is called type 1 diabetes, and generally this is a type of diabetes that someone is born with. Out of 100 cases of diabetes, only 5 of those cases are type 1, meaning only 5 out of 100 cases are type 1 diabetes, which you're born with, right? You don't really have control over whether you're born with type 1 diabetes. You just have it. Then there's type 2 diabetes, which out of 100 cases of diabetes, 90 to 95% of those cases are type 2. Now, type 2 diabetes is an acquired diabetes. For many, type 2 diabetes is something that happens because of a lifestyle. So that could be a diet or exercise lifestyle. And for many, type 2 diabetes is a reversible phenomenon, meaning if someone is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, lifestyle changes can often offset that type 2 diabetes, and often people can go back to having no diabetes at all. Out of 100 cases of diabetes, there's 1 to 2% that are gestational diabetes, which is when a woman is pregnant. Sometimes that pregnant woman can develop what's called gestational diabetes, or diabetes only during the time of pregnancy. And then there's that other diabetes. I'm not really sure what those other types of diabetes we might be talking about, but again, very rare. Between 1 and 5% of cases fall outside type 1, type 2, or gestational. Okay, so thinking about that question, is the data concerning? I want you to think about, what is type 2 diabetes and what causes it? Who might be getting type 2 diabetes and why? And then what we'll talk about hopefully next time is, are there treatments available and what kind of social factors might contribute to diabetes? So that's it for our today's data set. Now, I'm done lecturing to you right now, but what your goal is now is to go over to that evidence-based claim and really formulate a thoughtful response about what it is that the data is telling us. You want to be sure that you're citing a specific region, and you want to be sure that you are using data to back your claim. That's all for now, you guys. We will have another lesson posted on Monday in a similar way. Have a great day.